just a few weeks ago, we had Robert Bork Jr. on The Truth, and we had a very enjoyable conversation. You may recognize the name. He is the son of Robert Bork, who was a nominee to the Supreme Court in the 80s. And Robert Bork's a specialist in antitrust. In fact, he's written a book called The New Paradox. Robert, welcome back to The Truth.
Here, I'm just going to put this here for the rest of the show.
Shameless self-promotion. But put it up there. Put it somewhere where we can see it. And it is available on Amazon, I'm sure. Where else?
That's it. Only Amazon.
All right. And how's the book doing since we spoke
I guess
last?
it's doing fine. I don't really look. I spend most of my time talking to people like you, which is more fun than looking at the numbers. But it does have a great review on the back from Phil Graham. So if I've done nothing else, I've got Phil Graham to like my book.
Phil Graham, the very respected former U.S. Senator from Texas.
Correct.
Who I had the pleasure of meeting many years ago. He's a tall guy, I'll tell you. So Spirit Airlines declared bankruptcy, or is on the verge of declaring if they haven't already. But they went out of business last weekend. And we saw hundreds of thousands of travelers stranded, and inconvenience is a trivial way to describe it. And our United States government had a chance to save Spirit Airlines and elected not to. Give us your insight into why the government did not come to the rescue of Spirit.
Well, which time? A couple of years ago when they tried to merge.
Let's talk about this weekend, and then we'll go back and pull more layers of the onion out.
Yeah.
Because obviously, the Trump administration, Sean Duffy is blaming Biden and what was his name, the former head of the.
Well, it's a good opportunity for them to take a shot at Pete Buttigieg, the former transportation secretary, because
who may be running for president. Yeah,
it's all politics. Look, here's the unvarnished. Well, there may be a little varnished, but I'm not sure. But this is the unvarnished truth about this. Spirit was a basket case, and it was a basket case really by design. They chose, when they started this thing up, to be an ultra low cost airline. Now, what that means is that's great while it's working for passengers, get great prices. Maybe they're a little uncomfortable by the crowded seating. Maybe, it's a little difficult to get where you want to go sometimes. But it was, they never had an accident, which is, I think, worth noting. Basically, the problem for them was that they designed an airline that was ultra low cost, which meant that they had no margin for error. If something went wrong in the economy, fuel prices or something, there was no way for them to go. They couldn't raise prices because their market was ultra low cost pricing. So,
do you think the pricing was that sensitive that they couldn't have just bumped up pricing here and there, charged an extra buck for
it ended up
baggage
alienating their market. I mean, they apparently, they charge money to give you peanuts. They charge money for your baggage. They charge money for everything, extra fees. And people don't like that sort of stuff. I think I understand the reason they did it, so that they could have an actual airfare that looked lower than everybody else and attract business.
But also survive.
Yeah. But in the end, if you run a business like that, you don't have any cushion, really. You don't have any extra, cash on hand to deal with crises. And of course, one of the big problems for them was COVID. Apparently, that just really took a bite out of their business, a big one. And ultimately, they declared bankruptcy. Now, they thought they had a solution when they tried to merge with JetBlue. But the Justice Department under Joe Biden, who never saw a merger that they liked, they decided to block it. And they were successful in doing so because they basically don't like capitalism and they don't like mergers and acquisitions. And they one of their complaints was, well, that'll just make the fifth largest airline, and we can't have that. So they brought a case in the U.S. District Court, and Judge William Young blocked that $3.8 billion JetBlue Spirit merger in January of 2024, ruling it violated antitrust laws by eliminating a key ultra low cost competitor, which he argued would harm budget conscious travelers and raise ticket prices. Funny, that's sort of where we are right now.
That's what I was going to say. The end result is that we've eliminated competition, and what's going to happen? Ticket prices are going to go up because there will be more demand for fewer air seats.
You are jumping ahead to the punchline. Yes.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal your thunder. I just, you got excited there.
But from my perspective, when I look at this, I think, okay, well, they torpedoed, and this is the real paradox. They torpedoed a private sector solution to a bailout. Avoiding the bailout, they torpedoed a private sector solution, and implicitly, they voted for liquidation. Now that was a couple of years ago, but that's where they are, where they got themselves to. The result is exactly the opposite of what regulators promise, which is more choices and lower prices. But what they got now is fewer choices and higher prices. And what you mentioned, and I'm sorry, I went back in history first. The Trump administration said it would look at a bailout. And I think they probably did as best they could to, come up with something that would work. Donald Trump likes buying private equity, private assets, and he was prepared to, buy up to 90% of the company. But there were other people ahead of him, basically in line, and those were all the creditors, the hedge funds and others who owned Spirit stock. And I think they just decided, this is not good for us. We should just shut the thing down, start selling the assets. We'll get our money, such as it is, more and faster if we do that. And that's what happened. I don't think the government made whatever offer it felt was reasonable, and it just didn't. It wasn't enough to placate the creditors. So that's where Spirit is now no longer in business, and that's really unfortunate for all those people left, stuck at the airport and with cruises the next day that they can't get to and all that other stuff. But I think we're probably better off. As I wrote on Sunday in the Wall Street Journal, I just have a real problem with state capitalism, and that's what Donald Trump likes to do. He likes to put money into businesses, your money, my money, taxpayer money, into companies, and he likes to brag how Intel has made the taxpayer $5 billion or something since they bought 10% of it. But it is really a problem to have government ownership of private companies. Here's just one thing I think about. Okay, suppose that Spirit deal had gone through and the government now basically owned an airline. What does that mean for all the other airlines? Would Spirit be a favored provider? Would they not have to meet the same regulatory standards because Donald Trump wants to make sure that they succeed and they make money and all that? Would he give them a break on their safety standards? I mean, he would say no, but of course, but then the other airlines competing would be competing against an airline that had the comfort of being owned by the government, basically without fear of the marketplace making any difference to them. The government once it bought 90% wouldn't let it fail, so the marketplace would be totally disrupted. as it is now in a way. But guess what? The marketplace is adapting to the failure of Spirit. You know, Frontier apparently is rushing in with steep discounts to try to buy Spirit customers to inherit the customer base. Another airline called Avalo and Breeze Airways are expanding fast, and they're pitching like a nicer version of the Spirit experience. Allegiant Air is quietly picking up leisure travelers on routes that Spirit used to dominate. And of course, the big airlines, and this is the real story, the big airlines like Delta, United, and American, they are using the opportunity to move down market and offering basic economy fares. And they can afford to undercut everyone else because they've got premium passengers subsidizing those cheap seats that Spirit didn't have. So in the short term, you'll see deals, airlines fighting over stranded customers. But in the long term, fewer, I think, true low cost, ultra low cost carriers, which means less price pressure, which means higher prices pretty much for everybody. And Spirit used to keep everyone honest, but it's not there. And so again, another negative effect of a stupid decision to intervene in the marketplace and block that merger between JetBlue and Spirit.
So I used to, and I'm now maybe closer to neutral, but I was very anti-government owning equity in businesses for the very reasons that you highlighted. But then I watched the All In podcast. Are you familiar?
I don't think so, no.
With David Sachs, Jason Calazone, Jermuth.
I think you mentioned this to me before, but I haven't seen it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm a pretty big fan. And they use the example of the government bailout of General Motors and Stellantis. And so we loaned them hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe into the billions. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the money back.
No, you didn't.
And we got.
No, well, you didn't. You got.
All right. Well, riddle me that.
That thing lost money for taxpayers. The General Motors one and the Stellantis one. Those lost money for taxpayers. Now, again, I have different opinions of these things than I do about this Spirit thing. First of all, when General Motors came begging for a bailout, that was at a time when the economy was really tanking.
Sure.
And this was important to preserve, I think, an industry that is critical to the future of our economy, to the present and the future of the economy. One ultra discount airline is not the same thing. And the economy actually is booming right now. So it may be disruptive to the airline market, but it wasn't a question of life and death for or at least for the overall economy. And that's why a lot of people think that the bailout of General Motors was important in the context in which it was happening. This is a different context. This is a different time. The economy is doing much better than it was at that time. And again, maybe it's okay to take a drubbing on the stock price, but ultimately, we did not make back the money we put in, and the taxpayers paid the cost.
So you are mostly right, but there was both a loan, which was repaid, but there was also equity that was invested in General Motors, mm-hmm. which highlights the problem, because when the government then later sold its GM stock, it did that at a loss of about $10 billion to the taxpayers.
Right. Okay.
So, but had it gone the other way,
right, and we're having a mostly peaceful conversation, right?
What's that now? Well, yeah, of course we are. But The flip side is that had General Motors stock improved, then it could have been a boon for the taxpayers. And aren't there countries around the world that have like sovereign funds where they actually invest in companies and it's a big windfall for their citizenry?
Uh, I'm sure there are. I don't know that Saudi Arabia, having lost millions, maybe billions,
Mm-hmm.
in golf, would would agree with this entirely. But yes, there are sovereign funds, but there's also this moral question. I mean, should is that how you want to run your economy? Is that really going to make for a better economy, more innovation, better jobs, more wealth created, to have the government be the banker of first resort? I don't think it is, and I think it's as they say, a moral hazard of sorts to do that as well.
Well, on balance, I have to agree with you. I really, I'm in the Reagan school of, hi, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. And, it's just a fallacy. And every time government touches something, they seem to have the unique ability to mess it up. But in the case of Spirit, how much were they looking for from the U.S. government?
I don't know that number, but it had, actually, I think I read somewhere $500 million.
Well, that's real money.
That's real money.
Well, it is a dicey area. I do feel bad for the customers of Spirit because, as you accurately pointed out, now they have fewer choices and fares are likely to increase. So I don't know how that's good for anybody really, but the alternative of having a government bailout may actually be a worse and more bitter pill to swallow. I just wish and don't understand why the closing of the airline couldn't have happened in a more orderly fashion over a longer, although short period of time, like a week or two, to allow people to get home. It seemed very callous in the end.
Well, I think they were spending money they didn't have, and had been, and somebody just made the decision that we're not doing that anymore. The
Yes.
creditors.
The creditors, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
came to town and said, no, the party's over.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now you've also been following the Trump administration's apparent focus on the meat packers and looking at antitrust as a tool to break them up. I'm not sure.
I think that's what they're talking about, what they're thinking about. Basically in this country, we have four meat packing companies, two of which are foreign owned, which makes everybody a little bit nervous. Um,
One's from Brazil, is that
I
right?
think that's right.
That's the big one, I think.
Yeah, and I always thought this, just as an aside, when they would back in, was it the '80s, when people were jumping up and down about the Japanese, or maybe it was the '70s, the Japanese are buying real estate, they're buying our skyscrapers in New York and all that. And my thought was, well, what are they going to do with them? I mean, suppose they decide that's it, we're getting out of here. Well, they're not going to put them on a trailer and drive them back to Japan. The buildings, the assets are still going to be here, and it'll all happen in court, and there'll be financial issues, but ultimately those assets will stay here. And I don't think they're talking about. They were talking about knocking them down. That would be stupid because they'd have nothing of value left.
So those four meat packers are Tyson, JBS, which is the Brazilian company, Cargill, and National Beef Packing.
Yeah.
They own 80% of the market. That I did not know that. That's news to me.
Yeah. Well,
that is rather surprising.
It's a big share that these four companies control among them. But I gotta push back a little bit on this, unless the government knows something I don't know. What actual evidence of wrongdoing do they have, or is this just frustration over high grocery prices? I mean, I having worked in government, I know sometimes when you have bad things going on, you want to create an appearance that you're doing something about it.
Exactly.
Um,
And people are really beating the drum that he promised to lower prices, and prices are not coming down. That's not totally fair because they have come down in some areas. But right now, the war in Iran is causing the price of oil to go up, and energy, petroleum in particular, affects everything we do basically in our society. We drive cars to get places. The trucks deliver the food to restaurants and grocery stores. Plastic is largely a petroleum-based product. So it is kind of infused into our economy at virtually every level. The thing I don't understand in that context, we take a brief detour, we don't buy any oil from Iran. So I don't understand why the constraints on Iran oil production is having a ripple effect in the United States, where we get all of our oil from domestically.
Well,
we are energy independent.
There's nothing more complicated than oil prices. You've got the influence of the cartel, although that seems to be kind of maybe breaking up a little bit with the United Arab Emirates backing out of the cartel after 50 years or something. But here's the deal. I mean, that was my first thought too, when prices were going up. I thought, well, didn't Donald Trump tell us that we had more oil than the rest of the world, and we didn't have to worry about oil, yet our prices are going up? Well, I think that's because oil is a global market, and so something like this affects the global price, and the global price is what we go by, not just the price in Pennsylvania, where they're pumping natural gas out of the ground, or oil in the Permian Basin. So I think we are held hostage, frankly, by the global price. Now, that's too bad, but it is what it is. But I do think that the president is correct that if we can just get this Iran situation under control, it will in fact quickly reduce oil prices. Maybe not as quickly as we'd like, but it will.
Well, I wish he had called me before he went into Iran, because I would have told him, Mr. President, wars are easy to start and really hard to stop.
This is true.
And I think that's what's playing out in real time right in front of us.
No, I think the Iranians are devious and clever, because without a lot of assets, without a lot of military assets, they're quite able to cause global disruption. It's impressive, and that they are able to do so much with so little, and it really will be a test of will. Frankly, not just the president's, but the will of our allies, and the will of our consumers, if they can just hang on, which they don't have a lot of choice about, I suppose. But this will end, I think, favorably, and they had to pay higher gas prices for a while, which is easy for me to say because I don't drive that much, but much harder on people who are driving in to DC from on the Beltway. That's very expensive.
All right. So you also made mention, going back to the meat packers, that Chuck Grassley is not down with this, and he's a pretty powerful member of the U.S. Senate from Iowa, no less.
Yes. So he's been harping on this for a long time. He's a rancher and a farmer in Iowa, on top of being one of the most powerful United States senators. So I think this is a gift to him to some extent for doing this, and by doing this. And again, though, I don't know what the Justice Department has in terms of evidence, but high prices of themselves do not prove illegality. They can reflect all, and we were just talking about this about oil too. They can reflect, supply constraints, higher input costs, and just strong demand. So, and again, it's not illegal to be, to have a large market share. What's illegal is if you got it by collusion and if you're colluding on prices, and they'll have to prove that. So just bringing this investigation is not proof of anything.
Well, how does that explain the AT&T breakup in the 90s? I mean, were they guilty of, you can't collude with yourself. I mean,
well, they were colluding with the government.
They had extreme market share.
They were colluding with the government. They were a government-created monopoly. Telephony was very expensive, and the government thought it would be better to have it all under one company, which they did, and I'm sure AT&T and its shareholders thought this was a great idea. But ultimately, it was a restraint on innovation and on wealth creation. When they broke up AT&T, suddenly you had a bunch of telephone companies. Suddenly you had, the beginnings of the wireless market. Suddenly you had, growth and expansion and innovation and wealth creation and job creation in that industry that you'd never had before. Mm-hmm. So, but it was a government created monopoly, and those are bad under any circumstance.
Fascinating stuff. Robert Bork Jr. He is the president and board member of the Bork Group, a public affairs agency. He also wrote an op-ed piece for the Wall Street Journal just last week about the Spirit Airlines debacle. And he is an author, a business person, and hasten to add, a real patriot. Thank you for coming on The Truth today, Robert. It's been a pleasure having you.
That last one was the best one. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. You bet.